hard it is to sit in front of a microphone and not sing.
Go. I'm Sylvie Rainaldi. Oh, we're there. Hold on, let me just get my stuff.
Good evening, ladies. Ladies and gentlemen, these are two candidates for town council in town Montgomery. One, Karina Tipton and Sylvie Rainaldi. Ladies, we're going to start this off with opening statements by both of you. Sylvie, will you please lead?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for coming. My name is Sylvie Rainaldi, and I am running for Montgomery Town Council. So what I'm going to do for my time, just here as an opening statement, is tell you a little bit about myself on a personal and professional level, and also why I'm running for office. So on a personal note, I am from here in Orange County. This is where I grew up. I've been married for 10 years to my husband, Matt, and he grew up here in the town of Montgomery. He's a Valley Central grad. I grew up in the town of Cornwall. My parents are retired teachers from the Cornwall Central School District. We have 2 children, ages 3 and 1. And what I like to do in my free time, I like to read. My mom is a retired librarian. I have books in my blood. On a professional level, I have an undergraduate degree from Ithaca College in Healthcare Policy Studies and a master's degree from Penn State University in Healthcare Administration. I've been working in healthcare administration for about 20 years. I worked down in Manhattan for a while because that's where I went to find a job after I graduated from college. And now I work for a company where I get to work remotely, and I help community hospitals with their financial, I consult for community hospitals and their finances. So now I'm going to tell you why I'm running for office. So a couple of years ago, I started seeing signs all around town that had this big no med line, right, with an X through it, and we need a warehouse moratorium. So I was really curious about what was going on, and I started to attend board meetings for the town. And over again, in those board meetings, I noticed that members of the town board were not participating. They didn't have any questions. They were showing up unprepared, and sometimes they would vote. And that was really disappointing to me because we have 5 members of our town board, 1 supervisor, and 4 council members. And I expected as a member of the public that each one of those council members would be an independent thinker, someone who would show up prepared to meetings, someone who loves town government and represents the town and our local businesses. And I thought to myself, are my standards too high? So, like many other people, last year when my job was put on hold because of COVID, I took a look at what I was doing and I said, maybe this is an opportunity to reflect and see if I can do something and I can contribute to our town. So I asked my job if I could stay part-time. That worked out for them, which I was very excited about. So I decided I was going to run for office because I wanted to run for the people like me, the people that expect their town officials to stand up for them, who expect the town officials to stand up against multi-billion-dollar companies that want to take advantage of our town with our tax incentives, to make sure that we have updated officials, updated laws and codes. And I wanted to make sure the officials plan for our future. And I decided that if I'm going to hold other people to those high standards, then I'm going to hold myself to those same high standards. And that's why I decided to run for office. Thank you.
Karina Tipton.
Hi, my name is Karina Tipton, and I am also running for Montgomery Town Council. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you so much for the volunteers who put this together. An event like this can be very complicated to organize, and I really appreciate how much work everybody put into it. I moved to Montgomery about 13 years ago when I first met my husband and my stepsons. And like many newcomers to Montgomery, I settled down in the village. I live in the village of Montgomery. I worked and I commuted and I got to know my new family, and I tried to figure out where my spot was in the town. And for a long time, that was fine. I learned to love Montgomery. I joke that I came to Montgomery for love, but now I love Montgomery. The things that I love about Montgomery are the things that I think a lot of us love about Montgomery. And because I moved here with my 2 stepsons who grew up in Montgomery, their mom's family is a Montgomery family, I feel like I have the best of 2 worlds. I get the perspective of a newcomer who came here because she loves Montgomery and decided to stay here on purpose. And I also get to see Montgomery through the eyes of my kids, people that have got a long, deep family history, and they're able to really understand the town in a different way than I do. Professionally, I'm an environmental engineer. I work on remediation and construction projects. I've got about 20 years of experience, and I am a PE in the state of New York, although I don't do a lot of stamping. I'm really mostly a project manager. When I started to see the legal notices for these two big warehouses that were coming into Montgomery at the same time a few years ago, that's when I really started to pay attention. I have this background in construction, this background in the environment, and I thought to myself, you know, this is an opportunity where I can get to know my community better. This is a place where I can start to offer some of my professional skills, and maybe I'll have a chance to meet some of my neighbors. Another joke that I have is, it can be kind of hard when you move here to make friends, and for a long time I figured I was just gonna sit at the end of my driveway and wave at everybody in the tractor parade as it went by, and maybe after 25 years people would be like, oh yeah, that's that new kid that just moved to Montgomery. But instead, what I did is I met a lot of people in the back of those meetings, people that were like me, people that were concerned about the community, people that were really concerned about what was happening in our town, and they didn't understand how to use their voice. And they felt like they didn't have a voice because the town was just gonna do what the town was just gonna do. And when I started to meet those people, another joke I have is I got to meet all of the people that write the letters to the editor, which I really didn't think was gonna be my new close group of friends, but there you go, we're all buddies now. I would say since I first started attending those public hearings, I've logged thousands of hours working with people in the community of Montgomery. I joined the Conservation Advisory Council. All of the C's are going to get confusing. And that's how I started to get to know a little bit more closely all of the projects that are in front of the planning board. The CAC advises the planning board as to the environmental aspects or negative components of a project that is in front of the planning board. I went to town board meetings, planning board meetings, IDA meetings, zoning board of appeals meetings. I went to a lot of meetings, and I made public comments in a lot of those. I came prepared, I had prepared statements, I handed them in after I spoke, and I basically kept asking all of the boards, do better. I need you to do better for us. Don't just give away our town to these people that are coming in with their millions of dollars, their cadres of lawyers, their panels of engineers. Do better for us. I'm asking you to do better for us. I'm running for Montgomery Town Council because I believe in our community. Knocking on doors, I've met so many people who have the same problems and concerns that my family does, my kids do, and my parents do who live here as well. And I'm really looking forward to this opportunity to go over those in more depth with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. So from here on in, it's going to be 2-minute limits, and at the 15-second remaining mark, Lisa will raise her hand, and we'll try to get through this. We do have a lot of time here, so I suspect that I'm receiving a lot of audience participation here, so I might be adding some of those questions on there, some really good questions here, if you don't mind.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Karina, what is your vision for the town of Montgomery?
So, like I said, Montgomery is a really great place, just as it is right now. I think there's some things that we can tweak, right? Nobody likes the fact that our roads are falling apart. Nobody really likes the fact that there's a lot of traffic coming in. Sometimes it feels like the ferry boat got off when you're trying to leave your driveway if you live on 211 or 17K. But there's a lot of really wonderful things about Montgomery that I think we all believe in. And those are things like having intergenerational families in town, having a town where your kids can afford to stay in Montgomery when they start their new families if they'd like to, and your parents can afford to stay in Montgomery if they choose to downsize their homes. Having local farms close to where I live is very important to me as well, and we have that already here. So having a community where we're supporting our local farmers and we're making sure that they can continue to farm and to provide for us is also a key part of my vision. I think it's really important that we have a community where people can work where they can afford to live. I would like Montgomery to have jobs that pay a living wage, where they can stay in this town and they'll be able to participate in the community without having a 40-hour commute, like 45-minute commute, excuse me, like I do to New Jersey, or a 2-hour commute like my husband did to New York City before COVID. I don't really think that there's a huge amount of things that need to change, but the biggest thing I would say in my vision that does need to change is to have a government that fights for you. I think right now when I go to these meetings, I see a lot of frustration on the part of people that feel voiceless. They're not really sure what they are going to get when they go and speak in. Honestly, it feels like when you go in to speak in a public comment period or a public hearing, the decisions have already been made and you're just kind of irritating the people that have already made those decisions. And I'd like to have a community where people feel like they have an opportunity to exchange their opinions, their goals, and their beliefs with their elected representatives and get some action.
Thank you, Karina. Sylvie?
Thanks. I've thought a lot about this, my vision for Montgomery. And what I realized when I was thinking about it is that this past year, our town adopted a new comprehensive plan for the town. And that comprehensive plan is the vision for Montgomery. So that plan was written by a very dynamic and diverse group of community volunteers to lay out what the future would be for our town. And I'd like to just give Karina credit for being one of the authors of that, as well as Kristen Brown, one of our town board members that's here in the audience tonight. But the reason I bring that up is because as a town council member, my vision is your vision, right? It's bringing that Montgomery comprehensive plan to life and actually making the change and the suggestions that were in that plan. So some of those things that I just brought as examples are that our residents really want to protect the character of our community, and they really want to support our local businesses. In order to make that happen, we need to update our zoning laws to ensure our future developments are compatible with our town's character. We need to have things like safe roads and safe water. We need to make sure that we have development that's smart in this town and that we use our ability for our tax giveaways, that we use those as real leverage to bring in companies that wouldn't otherwise have come. And these companies, we want to bring them in that have good jobs. So people not only can live here, but want to live here. So that's the first part of my vision. Is my time up, or that's my 15 seconds? So we need town council members that are willing to put in the work to make that Montgomery comprehensive plan come to life. And that is what my goal would be as a town councilwoman.
Thank you, Sylvie. So, visions. How does your vision differ from your counterpart?
So I have yet to hear my counterparts speak about their vision, so I have no comment as to how it differs, because I'm not sure what the other candidates' visions are.
Karina?
The same. I've been in many meetings, many public arenas, and I just haven't heard what their plans are, what their vision is for the future.
Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to an audience question just to break it up a little bit, okay? There's really a lot of good questions here.
Oh boy.
Karina,
Yes, sir.
how will you ensure that open government and full transparency will be followed in the town of Montgomery?
That's a really good question. There's a couple of things that come immediately to mind. One is making sure everybody understands what open government rules are and making sure that it's just a norm within the government that we're going to adhere to open government standards and requirements. And if that means we need to go as a group for a special seminar in Albany to figure this out, I would hope that the rest of the board would be willing to do that with me so we could make sure we're all starting out on the right foot together. Another thing that comes to mind is making sure that live streams are audible to people. I mean, the one good thing about COVID is that all of these meetings started to be live streamed. A lot of public groups started to have them on Zoom. The town board has hired people to live stream the meetings, and I think that's excellent. But what they haven't done is invested in the infrastructure to actually make it audible for people that aren't able to come in person. There's no microphones necessarily. Batteries consistently drain. There doesn't seem to be a speaker system that's visible. There are monitors, televisions that are mounted to the walls, but they're irregularly used. And if the board is looking at information, you can't see it when you're in the audience. I think having a little bit more of a thoughtful way of approaching a meeting in a way that makes it accessible for everybody is also very, very important. And the last thing about transparency in government is the idea that, you know, your elected representatives' doors are always open. And that's 100% true. And we see that with a lot of our elected representatives right now. But it's more than just picking up the phone and having a phone call. It's following through on what you said you're going to do and making sure you're consistently meeting your promises.
Thank you, Karina. Sylvie, would you like me to read it again?
No, I think I got it.
Okay.
So, you know, one of the things that I learned in my corporate career in public speaking is that there's this little motto that I follow, and it's say what you're going to say it, and then say it again. And I think that it's really important that our town officials up on our town council each have the ability to speak to the public in a way that is communicating what is going on in our town in a way that the public understands consistently. And I think that what I have found in these town meetings that I've spent many, many hours in is that it took me a really long time to understand the lingo, understand who does what, and understand how decisions are made. And I don't think that we should have people struggling with those types of questions for their town government. So it's very important to me that I take what I've learned from my corporate career in communication, that I've learned from my parents who are teachers, and that we speak to our community in a way that helps them understand every single thing that we're doing. I just want to say that Karina and I have had a lot of practice with doing this when we've done our town hall tailgates. And it's just the show that we do when we recap the town meetings, because that's really what we believe in. And we're showing you how we want information communicated to the public. And I think that's very important, and that's what I would do.
Thank you very much. Again, town taxes is something that everyone talks about. It's not only town taxes, it's our school taxes, it's our county taxes, it's our village taxes. What measures, Sylvie, will you take to control taxes, at least at the town level?
Yeah, this is something that I get asked all the time when I'm talking to people, talking to voters. I think that this has a couple of things. The first is that we need to make sure that we stop giving extremely generous tax incentives to companies who don't need it. Because when we do that, what happens is they will not contribute into our tax pool, and we all pay the difference. Now, I understand that some companies need those tax incentives to come into our community for good paying jobs, but we have taken advantage of those tax incentives and given them to companies who don't need them. So that's the first thing, is making sure that we have strong policies to protect that from happening. The second thing is that from my career in finance, I'm a budget person, right? And I live in the numbers. And I don't just get numbers handed to me and just say, sure, that's okay. I, as a councilwoman, would go through every single line item on our budget to make sure that we're not having any kind of wasteful spending, that we're planning for the services that we need and the services that we have. Because in order to make sure that we curb our taxes, we need to really be following the finances and have many good, creative, smart people looking at our budgets. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvie. I'm going to go to a audience question again. This year is my daughter's first ever opportunity to cast her vote. If elected, what measures will you implement to ensure the town's citizens can participate in the next Meet the Candidates event? Karina.
This year is the year that my younger stepson is casting his first vote also, and I really understand the emotion behind that. I think it's so exciting for new voters. This Meet the Candidates night, it was set up with very good intentions, and unfortunately it just didn't pan out. You can see there's only 2 of us sitting here, and it's not through lack of communication and hard work and trying to get everybody at the table. But I think that in order to have a more successful Meet the Candidates night next year, I think it's important that it's driven by somebody who has that as their job, and they understand that as you're going into election season. We need to have an impartial person, perhaps somebody from outside of town government, and we need to ask them before the election starts, can you help us facilitate this? We don't want to drop the ball again, because the community is not being served tonight. And I appreciate the opportunity to get to know people. I love that I get to sit here with Sylvie and talk about things that we're super passionate about. I'm so grateful for everybody who came out in person and who's watching online. But we could have offered a different perspective if we had some other folks here at the table. And I'm disappointed about that as well. I think it's important to plan early, and I think it's important to understand who's going to be in charge of pulling it together and to get everybody to agree to it as soon as possible in the election cycle.
Thank you, Karina. Sylvie?
I think that Karina really covered exactly, how I feel. I would have really loved to have additional candidates here tonight, and I think that one thing that we've learned from running for office for the first time is how to do things differently and better for the future. And I think Karina really covered it, because this is a lesson for us. And when we make mistakes, we just learn from them. So I think she's got it. Plan early, get people involved that are dedicated to making this event happen, respected on both sides, and make sure that we have dates scheduled and facilities scheduled and AV scheduled in a way that both sides can agree to well in advance.
Thank you, Sylvie. The next question is going to have A and B parts to it.
Sure.
All right? The reason I'm going to bring the audience in on this question.
Call and response.
What
John?
would you do to minimize warehouse build-out? Sylvie.
Yeah. So our comprehensive plan really, and I will make sure, I think you have to make sure Karina can speak to this as well, as the engineer is really good about warehouse build out. And one of the things that I want to point out is I am by no means an expert in the things I'm not an expert at. So I'm going to tell you what I think I already know of my plans for warehouse build out. But absolutely, this is an area where I need experts in architect and engineering and land use to make sure that that happens. So I think it's really important for our warehouse build out that we know exactly what parcels of land are yet to be developed, that is where those warehouses are going to go, and that we have created zoning codes that define what percentage of land can be developed, that we protect our water sources and our wetlands, and that we create real buffers between those warehouses and their neighbors. And I think those are just 3 examples, and those are ones that I've read about over and over again that I really want us to implement in our zoning code, but they're by no means the full extent of what we need to do. And that's where I look to experts like Karina in engineering who can help us meet those goals of ensuring that we have the proper remaining warehouse build out in this town.
Thank you, Sylvie. Karina?
This is a really great question, and it's something I've been struggling with since I found out what Amazon was going to do in our community. I think, just like Sylvie said, there's really excellent protections for our community built into the comprehensive plan. She named a few of them. There's a lot of real focus on land use. There's a focus on what kinds of jobs people are interested in having in the community, and that plan was developed with input from the community. We had many, many sessions where people came and they told us what they wanted. It wasn't, I appreciate that I had a chance to sit at that table over the period of a year, but believe me, it wasn't all my ideas. There are some really, really great ideas that came from the rest of the community and of course the rest of the committee members. I think in terms of warehouse build outs, I think one thing I'd like to look at is how many of these warehouses are speculative warehouses. One thing that the comprehensive plan does do is it identifies some different types of businesses that might be more interesting for the town and for people that want to work in the town. Those include high-tech businesses, manufacturing businesses. One of the problems with having so many warehouses in Montgomery is there's no diversity in what kinds of buildings we have. So right now we're in this distribution boom where Amazon and other companies are promising same-day delivery of things, so they need to have all these warehouses right next to you. Who knows what the future is going to bring? And I don't know how to repurpose a 1 million square foot warehouse. I have some ideas about how to repurpose a 500,000 square foot warehouse, but not a 1 million square foot warehouse. I think the other thing about minimizing warehouse build out is exactly what Sylvie was saying about land use and the types of communities that you're putting these warehouses into. When we first did the master plan in Montgomery 30 years ago, there was a lot less residential neighborhoods and a lot more open space. And right now our space is at a premium. And I think Montgomery should handle this premium real estate in that way. It should be treated as a resource that should be carefully utilized and carefully built upon.
Thank you, Karina. A. As Councilwoman, what would you do and what do you think you can do to rein in the town IDA and convince them they are to work for the town and do not work for the developers? Sylvie.
That is a very pointed question. Reining in the IDA. Interesting choice of words. I've had a lot of experience working with the IDA. I am not going to claim to rein anybody in, nor I think would that be necessarily my intent, but creating a direction for the IDA, I think they know my direction. I've had many conversations with them about it. I think we need to keep in mind that right now in the town of Montgomery, we have 2 competing IDAs for our town. And that's really important, and something that gets missed sometimes is there's an Orange County IDA that has oversight and can give tax breaks to companies that come to Montgomery. And then there's the Montgomery IDA who can do the same. And that creates some kind of weird competition between the 2. So the Montgomery IDA can't have as progressive as policies as they would like, or as the town or residents would like, is because they're in competition with the Orange County IDA. If a company doesn't like what they want from Montgomery, they can go to Orange County for the same tax incentives and tax a better deal. So I think we really need to figure out in Montgomery how we can shore that up to make sure that we don't have overlapping jurisdictions in the town. That's very, very important to me. I think once that happens, we can be really thoughtful about our policies. We have policies called the Uniform Tax Exempt Policy, which defines what companies get tax incentives and why. We have a policy called the Uniform Criteria Policy. I think that's Uniform Criteria Policy. All these acronyms in my head, which defines what elements have to be met for companies to receive tax incentives. And I think we really need to make sure that those policies lay the groundwork, because it's not about so much as the people. You need good people, but you also need good policies. And we need to raise those policies up, so that's what protects us and helps us make good decisions.
Thank you, Sylvie. B, there is a lot of valid concerns about pilots. But how will you ensure that the benefits we have been promised will be delivered?
Is this one for me?
Karina?
Okay. So a lot of the policies that Sylvie just spoke about that were redone at the beginning of the year. Sylvie, she volunteered with the IDA. She convened a group of citizens, business owners, residents, workers, people from all different walks of life, and took a hard look at those policies. And making sure that those benefits actually come to the community was a big part of that conversation. And I was at the table as well. I was happy to be invited for those conversations. There's simple things and there's hard things, right? There's simple things like when you're building something, you're supposed to have a certain percentage of local labor. A simple thing is to make sure they submit certified payroll instead of just having an inspector schedule a visit to go and look at a book full of photocopied licenses to just kind of estimate whether or not all of the people are coming in from the right places, or if they're coming in from Pennsylvania or Ohio or Kentucky, like so many people do when they're working long-term construction jobs. A harder thing is keeping tabs on those businesses long-term. We've got policies that ask for business to provide us jobs long-term, but we don't seem to follow up right now. We don't seem to have any kind of long-term vision. Something that we say a lot in engineering is you can't conserve what you don't measure. And the same thing applies to things like IDA benefits. If we're not following up with people, if we're not measuring what they're actually doing, then we have no idea if they're actually meeting their expectations. And that's where the clawback comes into position. I think the hardest thing that the town board actually has control over is making sure that they appoint people to the IDA board that are going to have those tough conversations, and they're going to claw back those benefits if we're not getting the benefits that were promised to us as a community.
Thank you, Karina. Sylvie?
Can you just repeat that last question for me?
There are a lot of valid concerns about pilots, but how will you ensure that benefits we have been promised will be delivered?
So I've had a lot of conversations with members of the IDA, with my other volunteers, about exactly how those promises are measured. And that is something that I have yet to get very clear answers for what, because when a pilot is agreed to, there are multiple things and agreements that are come to that. And Karina spoke to a few of them. What percentage of local labor is used in the construction? And then what kind of jobs, how many jobs, what they would be paid after the fact. And what I miss when I follow through with these IDA meetings, when I go to them, are consistent expectations of when those companies report back to the town on how they've done, how they've met those measures, and how that works over time. And it just seems like the pilots are given and then we just walk away. And we don't know if those promises were ever met. And that's something I find very, very frustrating. I find it frustrating as a member of the town, a member of the public, that that's not information that I can clearly find, and that it's not clear to me that that's happening. I think that part of an IDA is creating the right incentives for the right companies, but the other part we have to do, which is to hold the companies accountable for the promises that they made when we gave them these incentives.
Thank you, Sylvie. I do have more audience questions. I'm going to put that on hold for now.
Sure.
Next question. What can be done in Montgomery to resolve the housing shortage and affordable housing issues? Sylvie.
Sure. This one is a really hard question, right? Because the town board doesn't oversee the housing market. So I've had to think very creatively about this type of issue, but I have to go back to, I'm not here to make things up. I'm here to look and do the research, right? So when I was thinking about housing, I thought to myself, I'm very sure, because I read the entire Montgomery Comprehensive Plan, that there was an entire section on housing here. So it's already been laid out for us as to what the town, the residents would like for housing in this town. So the first thing is that there are ways that we can create what the town board can do, right? Not what I would personally like, but what would I be able to do as a councilwoman? So the first is to encourage something that we have yet to have in this town, which is adaptive reuse. It's coming up with ways to use existing buildings to provide different types of housing so that we don't have unoccupied buildings. It's being done all over the county and state. I stayed in one once when I was out in a different state, of a adapted factory that had turned into an apartment building. I think we really need to be thoughtful and make sure that we have the ability for developers to come in here and do that. The second is that we need to have very smart zoning codes that allow for different types of populations to build types of housing that work for what they need. So that's senior housing, veterans housing, housing for people with special needs. When we have good zoning codes that create incentive for those types of communities to be built and housing to be built, that's how we can help on the town board level to make sure that we have the right type of housing for the people in our community.
Thanks, Sylvie.
Yep.
Karina?
Yeah, just like Sylvie said, the role of the town board is, it's not one of development, right? They're not out necessarily. I mean, some governments do this. They'll do an investment program where they'll use taxpayer dollars to create an investment in economic development, but that's not really what our town board does. But what the town board can control are the incentives and the incentives and the things that will bring people in to do the things that the town board wants for the community. And it's easy to think of incentives just as like handing out money, right? Like that's the IDA's job, which is the industrial development agency, not the residential development agency. So I'm not going there, don't worry. But incentives could be things like providing better access to water and sewer. It could be things like providing a higher density of smaller houses or smaller buildings if you also preserve a lot of land nearby. And so these are some of the balancing acts that you can get into as the town board that could create an environment where a developer might say, you know what, actually the market is really hot right now. True story. Maybe we really do need to go into Montgomery and build a lot of very small houses that are on a beautiful street that's got a huge area of conserved land around it. That's the kind of thing that the town board can do. And like Sylvie said, it is all laid out in the comprehensive plan. We've got all of the plans right there. What we need are people that are going to work hard and they're going to implement those plans. And when I said before that I think Montgomery has a really bright future, in part it's because of my work on the comprehensive plan. And I know that we've got these blueprints out there that just have to be built. And that'll help us out with a lot of these housing issues.
Thank you, Karina. Moving on. What is the town's responsibility in supporting first responders? Police, fire, ambulance? Sylvie?
Yeah, so this question is very dear to me. I volunteer as a trustee for the Montgomery Ambulance Corps, and making sure that we support our first responders in this town is something that I take very seriously. And I think that it is the town's responsibility to make sure that all of our first responder services have the resources that they need to plan for what they need right now and also plan for the future. Every single one of those agencies that you listed, the ambulance corps, the fire, and the police, they all have different needs, right? They all are in a different place in their industry. And it's important for the town board to really understand the detail of what each one needs, what they need right now and what they need to plan for the future. So for those that don't know, the Town of Montgomery Ambulance Corps is a not-for-profit 501c3. It is not run by the town. It is a standalone company. It does receive some support from the Town of Montgomery. And with all of these first responders, the industries are changing. So it's what I believe is that the town council just needs to make sure and sometimes have some very hard conversations with each of these groups to make sure that they can take care of what they need to take care of for our community right now and that they have a plan for their future. And I think that sometimes these are uncomfortable conversations, but they have to be had. And I think that that's what the job of a councilwoman would be, is to have those hard conversations, not in a way that is in any way criticizing, it's actually, or saying things are being done wrong. It is to just make sure that we have good plans. And that's what I intend to do as councilwoman.
Thank you, Sylvie. Karina?
Yeah, this is a really great question. We've been talking about a lot of the different jobs that the town board has, the town council has, and one of them is to make sure that the residents who live here and pay taxes here have a quality of life that they expect to have and that's reasonable. And I think that we would all agree that part of that quality of life equation is when you pick up the phone and you call 911 because you're having a medical emergency, an ambulance is going to come promptly and they're going to be able to help you. And one of the things that the town needs to consider in terms of that responsibility is what are the needs of, just like Sylvie said, the different groups, the different organizations, is in terms of the ambulance corps, I think, and this is like a tricky conversation for sure, and I'm by no means an expert either, but if you do any reading, volunteerism is down, and that it's down for a lot of reasons. It's down in ambulance corps, it's down in fire departments, and it has a lot to do with the way people are having to work and live these days. They're working far away from where they live. They're working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. All of these things are contributing to an inability to fill your teams with volunteers. And I hate to say it, but the ambulance corps may be a bellwether for how we need to approach our volunteer fire departments in the future as well. There's a lot of other municipalities nearby that have gone to a hybrid volunteer. Some folks on the fire departments are paid, some folks are volunteer. That's the same thing that we've got right now with our ambulance corps. What I do know is that in order to preserve that quality of life, you can't kick the can down the road. When somebody comes in front of you and says we're running out of money, it's important to act decisively and it's important to act with a long-term plan. You can't play politics with our first responders.
Thank you, Karina. I have one more question. What I'm going to try to do is combine 2 questions into one. When this election is over, what is your plan to work with people of different political parties on your board? Also, how do you think you could mend the political environment that we've had over the past month And past couple of years, as you know, it's been very strenuous on a lot of people. How are you going to handle those things, Sylvie?
So I'd like to do what I've been doing. I'd like to just stay the course for how I've been communicating with members of the public, with members of the town board, because I'd like to lead by example. I think that for me on the town council, it doesn't really matter what party people are affiliated with. In fact, when I was volunteering with members of the IDA, I did not know, and still to this day do not know what their party affiliations were, because it didn't matter to me. I was just volunteering on behalf of my community to make good policies with regards to our town. So I'm not sure that party politics really plays a big role, or should play a big role in our town, but in some cases it does. I'm not naive to that. But I think the most important thing is that I lead by example, and I consistently will always make sure that I listen to all sides, and sometimes you have to listen to the side you don't agree with more, and that is what I've done, because that's how you learn and that's how you grow, and that's how we can be a better community. So, you know, large scale issues, that some of which, you know, Fran mentioned in her closing statement, that don't play to how we can move forward in our future. We just need to keep our eyes on the prize here. We are here for the town of Montgomery, and that's where we need to keep our focus.
Thank you, Sylvie. Karina.
I totally agree with Sylvie. I count in my circle of trusted advisors who've helped me with this candidacy, who've helped me with these warehouse fights. I count in that group people from all walks of political life. I think our community is invigorated and strengthened by having an open dialogue with people that you trust. And for me, maybe this comes off as naive, but I'm always going to show up expecting the best from other people. I always will. I'm going to give my best, I'm going to work my hardest, and I'm going to expect them to give me the best of themselves as well. And that's how I would approach working on the town board. I'm not sure who's going to be elected. I certainly hope it's going to be the two of us, but I don't know what the party breakout is going to be on November 3rd or November 10th after the absentee ballots are collected. But I really do expect everybody on that board to show up and to do their best, because it's not about me and it's not about them. It's about all of you. And if you can't trust your representatives to truly represent all of you with your many different perspectives and your many different opinions, then they're not doing their job. They're just serving themselves. And I think part of working in a bipartisan environment at the town level is truly to serve the people.
Thank you, Karina. All right, we're going to go right to the closing remarks. You're going to be able to have 3 minutes. If you go over a little bit, that's fine. But Karina, you're going to lead.
Okay. Gosh. I made a joke earlier today that Sylvie was going to have to go second because she does so great in these occasions to share her thoughts, and I was like, I'm done following her, but I guess Dawn took me at my word.
I feel that way about you when I follow you.
I'm really, even though this meeting did not go as I think a lot of us had hoped it would, I'm so thankful for the opportunity to come here and to share myself and my feelings with so many different people. When I've been out knocking on doors, I've met so many different folks from so many different walks of life. And as I talk to them and as they get to know me and I get to know them, I'm hearing the same concerns from each one of them. And it's the same concerns that my 22-year-old stepson tells me when he says he's going to move out of Montgomery. It's the same concerns that I hear from my in-laws when they talk about what they're doing here in Montgomery and why they moved here and whether or not they're going to stay if they need to downsize their house. I think these are all universal values that we have. And I think big picture, the town of Montgomery, like I said before, we're at a really bright spot. We're at a beautiful crossroads. We've got these blueprints in front of us that we need to enact. We've got excellent community-driven plans for how we all want to see our community developed and how we all want to move into the future. Not just next year, but in 10 years or 20 years. What we need right now are people that are going to do the hard work. Sometimes that hard work means having tough conversations with people. Sometimes it means working with somebody that you don't agree with on national issues. Sometimes the hard work just simply means rolling up your sleeves and doing your homework. And that's what Sylvie and I are going to bring to the table. I said before that I was a project manager, and the three things that people always say about project managers: your job is to manage your scope, your schedule, and your budget. That's it. You also have to manage a team, but that's not a measurable metric, so that's the soft stuff that people don't really care about when it comes to project management. The scope of this job is immense, right? But you can write it down and you can pick it apart. You can pull apart the things that we can start to accomplish tomorrow. We can pull apart the things that need to be done in 1 year. We can come up with a long-term plan. The schedule part is equally important. If you say you're going to do something, you need to do it. The community expects you to show up, to have the public hearings, and to get the work done. And the schedule is important because the world around us is rushing faster and faster, and we are unprepared for million-square-foot warehouses. So we need to do our work to stay on schedule. And budget, I mean, we talked a little bit before about taxes. Budget is the most important component because that impacts our quality of life in terms of how much additional flexible spending we have as homeowners. It impacts whether or not we're able to afford an ambulance corps or to pay full-time police officers instead of part-time police officers. All of these things are super critical when it comes to budget. I talk to everybody about their long-term dreams for their families, right? But at the end of the day, I'm coming at this job very professionally. I'm looking at this as a project manager would look at their plans for the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And I'm not saying that because I want to be a 10-year council member. I certainly do not. This year, I didn't ride my motorcycle at all. And while I really liked getting out there and talking to everybody, I really would have liked a nice motorcycle ride on the weekends also. But I think that it's important to take a minute right now while we've got these nice blueprints in front of us, while we've got a nice, fresh, hot off the press comprehensive plan, and to really take a long-term look at how we can preserve our community and keep it the type of community that we appreciate, and make it a little extra so our kids will love it here too. Thank you very much, and I really hope you'll choose to support me as your town council candidate on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. Sylvie.
And now I'm supposed to follow that.
That's right.
It's just unfair. So, you know, one of the things that I hear a lot of is people who say that are running for office, I'm not a politician, right? You hear this all the time. And it's, you know, for people who are running for office for the first time, they're not politicians yet, because they have never been a politician. Karina and I are running for office for the first time. But when I thought about that saying, I'm not a politician, I realized that sometimes it was being used as an excuse to not be prepared. And I consider this campaign a job interview. And just like any job interview, I show up prepared. And Karina and I have been preparing for this, what I would like to say, the hardest job interview I have ever had, which is to be hired by my entire town to represent them. We have been working on this for a very long time. We have attended every town board meeting. We have brought to those meetings real content and comments and changes to policies. We have volunteered hours of our time. Karina on the Comprehensive Plan Committee, me with the Montgomery Ambulance Corps and the Montgomery IDA. And we have put in the preparation for this job on the town council. In fact, working together has been one of the most amazing things that I could have ever asked for. And coming up with an innovative idea like our town hall tailgate was a joint effort. It was because after every town meeting, we were standing outside the town hall, having the tailgate privately and talking about what happened and what questions we would have asked if we were allowed to comment. So we decided as a team that we would show that to our town in a public way, to share that content with everyone, to make them feel more engaged. And these are the types of things that we've done, I would say, as part of our job interview for the town, for you to see who we are. If you want to know what I think about a warehouse over here or the future of, you know, the ambulance corps, you can watch me for hours talking about these things. You don't have to in your spare time, but I know it's there, and we're here for you. And I think that part of this job interview has been so rewarding, and it won't stop. Whether I'm elected or not, I'm still showing up to those meetings because I still want to see these changes. But I just want to point out that not being a politician, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be prepared. So what I want to close with is, in my family, we have conservatives and we have liberals. My husband and I have families that are on very different sides of the political spectrum. I like to say during like our family events, our house is Switzerland. Like everybody's got to come to the middle and get along, and they absolutely do. Our families adore each other. But because of that, and the reason that is because we all have the same values. And that is what I think is really important. So in our family, we value kindness, we value honesty, and we value hard work. We value listening to other people, especially when they don't agree with us. And these are the values that I learned from my family, having people on different sides, and you can ask either side of them, that it is my husband and I and me that bring people together so that we can have a cohesive, loving family. And these are the values that I would bring to the town of Montgomery as a councilwoman. So as Karina said, I kindly ask for your vote on November 2nd. I am honored to be running with my teammate Karina Tipton. She has been an amazing partner in this. I could not have dreamed of a better person to run with, and I sure hope that you elect both of us so that we can work for you for the next 4 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So one note I'd like to say, I really appreciate you two coming here and being here and giving your opinions on things. You're answering an awful lot of questions. Hopefully this will be the stimulus that in the future our entire town during election time will all come together and will allow our residents to meet the candidates. I thank you so much for that. And I thank the audience for showing up, the residents that are here. I really appreciate that. The questions you gave were phenomenal. They were really great, so thank you for that. That's it?
All right.
Okay, thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you so much.